Detective Chen?
Reporting to Sheriff. The badge is still here, and so am I.
They laughed at homeless woman's police stories until the chief saw her badge. Detective Sarah Chen clutched her worn leather jacket tighter as she entered Municipal Court Room 2A at 8:30 a.m. on Monday morning, her weathered face and unkempt appearance drawing snickers when she mentioned her police background to the clerk. In 40 minutes, when Chief Michael Rodriguez walked through those doors, her 20-year career would collide with her current reality. Sarah, 52, appears to be another homeless woman spinning tales about her imaginary past, but her precise knowledge of criminal procedure and investigative terminology reveals training that decades of street experience can't fabricate. Her shopping cart and cardboard sign conceal a mind that once solved the city's most complex cases. What happened in Judge Patterson's courtroom would expose how society discards its protectors when they fall through the cracks, and how one chief's recognition would prove that heroism doesn't vanish just because circumstances steal everything else. Municipal Court Room 2A in downtown Phoenix, an overcrowded venue where minor criminal cases are processed with assembly line efficiency. The wood-paneled courtroom handles everything from traffic violations to trespassing charges, with Judge Patterson maintaining order through stern efficiency rather than empathy for defendants who can't afford proper representation. The legal environment operates on appearance-based prejudices. Defendants in suits receive respectful hearings, while homeless individuals face immediate skepticism about their character, honesty, and mental competence. Court security officers view homeless defendants as potential disruptions requiring management, rather than citizens deserving due process. Recent increases in homelessness have flooded the court system with trespassing and loitering cases involving individuals whose stories are dismissed as fabrications designed to gain sympathy. This setting represents how justice systems often fail those who've served society when they need protection, most treating former public servants like common criminals when circumstances destroy their lives. Sarah joined Phoenix PD at 23, rising through the ranks by solving cases that stumped veteran detectives. Her photographic memory and intuitive understanding of criminal behavior made her the department's go-to investigator for complex homicides, organized crime, and cold cases. Over 20 years, she solved 89% of her cases, including the notorious Riverside serial killer who terrorized the city for 3 years. Sarah's innovative investigation techniques and relentless pursuit of justice earned commendations and respect from colleagues who trusted her with their most difficult cases, requiring exceptional detective skills. PTSD from years of violent crime scenes, combined with prescription drug addiction that developed after being shot during a drug bust, led to Sarah's early retirement and subsequent downward spiral. When her pension was reduced due to administrative errors, she couldn't afford to fight legally. She lost her home health insurance and support systems that had sustained her through 2 decades of police service. Now she lives in shelters, battles addiction, and struggles with mental health issues while maintaining fragments of investigative instincts that homelessness cannot completely erode, despite devastating her professional identity. Despite her circumstances, Sarah retains complete law enforcement knowledge and investigative abilities that homelessness cannot erase. Her understanding of criminal procedure, evidence analysis, and case law remained sharp through intellectual training that transcends her current situation. Sarah can assess suspects, understand complex legal situations, and communicate in police terminology that reveals her authentic expertise to anyone qualified to recognize it. Her greatest strength is maintaining investigative instincts while helping other homeless individuals navigate legal problems through knowledge that police academy training provided, but society no longer values when it comes from unexpected sources. Sarah must defend herself against trespassing charges while court personnel dismiss her claims of police background as delusional fabrications from homeless woman seeking sympathy rather than legitimate former law enforcement officer whose circumstances obscured but didn't eliminate her professional qualifications. The primary obstacle is legal system prejudice that judges credibility by appearance rather than actual knowledge, preventing Sarah from effectively presenting evidence of her police experience that would explain her behavior and demonstrate her understanding of legal procedures that homeless status apparently invalidates. The stakes involve both legal consequences and personal dignity. Conviction would result in jail time she can't afford, while losing credibility confirms society's judgment that her police service was worthless fantasy, rather than authentic career protecting the same community, now prosecuting her. This conflict represents broader injustices facing former public servants whose circumstances prevent recognition of their service when systems they once protected treat them as criminals rather than fallen heroes deserving support and respect. Sarah's trespassing arrest began when she sought shelter in the abandoned warehouse, where she'd once investigated a triple homicide, returning to a crime scene that held personal significance but was now considered private property. She had no legal right to access despite her professional connection. "I was lead detective on the Morrison case in 2018, Sarah explained to the arresting officers, but her homeless appearance caused them to dismiss her claims as fantasies from mentally disturbed vagrant who'd probably read about the case in newspaper archives. The incident crystallized everything wrong with society's treatment of former public servants. Her police experience could have provided valuable insights about building security and criminal activity patterns, but her appearance prevented anyone from recognizing her expertise until legal consequences proved her knowledge authentic. "If I don't defend myself properly," Sarah thought while reviewing the trespassing charge, "they'll never understand that I wasn't just seeking shelter. I was revisiting a place where I once served the community that's now prosecuting me." Her case represented more than simple trespassing defense. It was vindication of her police career and challenge to systemic prejudice that discarded qualified law enforcement professionals when circumstances changed their social status, but not their knowledge or capabilities. Sarah prepared for court with investigative precision she'd once applied to criminal cases, researching legal precedents and procedural evidence that would prove her police background while demonstrating authentic expertise despite opposing counsel's expected character assassination attempts. Her preparation included detailed documentation of her police career, using departmental terminology and case knowledge that law school couldn't teach. But police academy training had embedded in her consciousness through years of practical application and field experience. Most critically, Sarah prepared for inevitable attacks on her credibility, based on appearance rather than knowledge, developing strategies to prove her law enforcement expertise through specific information that only authentic police officers could possess or articulate accurately under courtroom pressure. Her legal research revealed previous cases where homeless individuals had been denied justice through appearance-based prejudice, providing precedents that might protect her right to present evidence of her police service regardless of current circumstances or social status. Sarah also prepared psychologically for courtroom humiliation that would test every lesson police training had taught her about maintaining composure under hostile interrogation while protecting information that validated her professional identity despite circumstances that obscured it. Her documentation strategy emphasized objective police records that could be verified through department files and personnel databases, creating evidence trail that would validate her law enforcement knowledge even if opposing counsel successfully attacked her personal circumstances and current appearance. Sarah arrived at court early, using extra time to observe proceedings and analyze courtroom dynamics with investigative skills that homelessness couldn't eliminate despite circumstances that prevented anyone from recognizing her professional qualifications. Bailiff Martinez processed routine security procedures while obviously categorizing Sarah as typical homeless defendant, requiring supervision rather than former law enforcement colleague who understood courtroom protocols better than most attorneys present. "Ma'am, no disruptions during proceedings." Martinez warned Sarah while treating her as potential problem rather than recognizing police bearing that 20 years of service had ingrained despite her current circumstances and appearance. Public Defender Lisa Wong reviewed Sarah's case with obvious skepticism about claims of police background, focusing on plea bargain arrangements rather than mounting defense based on Sarah's legitimate law enforcement experience and professional knowledge. Sarah noticed Wong's dismissive attitude and assumptions about her capabilities based on appearance rather than evidence confirming her expectation that legal proceedings would test her police knowledge against prejudice that equated homelessness with ignorance about law enforcement procedures. Prosecutor James Miller's confident demeanor suggested easy conviction against homeless defendant who couldn't afford adequate legal representation or character witnesses to support claims about police career that circumstances had made socially unacceptable to acknowledge. Judge Patterson immediately demonstrated bias when Sarah began explaining her trespassing as returning to former crime scene, interrupting her with obvious skepticism about her claimed police background. "Ms. Chen, are you claiming to be a former police officer?" Patterson asked dismissively while Prosecutor Miller smirked at what they viewed as homeless woman, fabricating elaborate backstory to excuse criminal behavior. Sarah's accurate use of police terminology like crime scene integrity and investigative protocols was dismissed as television-inspired fantasy, rather than authentic law enforcement training that her detective career provided through years of actual field experience. Prosecutor Miller escalated the mockery by challenging Sarah's police knowledge, directly demanding proof of credentials she couldn't provide since her personal documents had been lost or stolen during months of homelessness following her pension crisis. "Your honored defendant is clearly attempting to mislead the court with fraudulent police claims," Miller argued while Sarah's detailed understanding of criminal procedure and evidence protocols was treated as elaborate deception rather than authentic knowledge from 20 years of detective work. Her precise procedural explanations were dismissed as coached testimony, despite their obvious accuracy and professional sophistication that television couldn't teach. The courtroom's hostility peaked when Judge Patterson threatened additional charges for Sarah's fraudulent impersonation of police officer, creating legal crisis where her authentic law enforcement background was being criminalized because her appearance didn't match expectations about retired detectives. Ms. Chen claiming false police credentials could result in felony charges, Patterson warned, while spectators laughed at homeless woman who alleged detective career that her circumstances obviously disproved through social prejudice. Sarah's desperate attempts to prove her police expertise through detailed case knowledge only reinforced assumptions that she was delusional or deliberately deceptive rather than genuinely qualified law enforcement professional. The courtroom atmosphere became increasingly hostile as Sarah's police knowledge triggered disbelief and ridicule from legal professionals who couldn't reconcile her expertise with her homeless appearance, creating prejudicial environment where evidence mattered less than appearance-based credibility assessment. Court reporter Janet Mills struggled with Sarah's technical police terminology, while bailiff Martinez exchanged knowing looks with security personnel who viewed proceedings as entertainment rather than legitimate legal defense requiring serious consideration of claimed law enforcement background. "This woman is clearly mentally ill," Miller whispered loudly enough for observers to hear, creating prejudicial environment where Sarah's police knowledge was being reframed as psychiatric symptoms rather than authentic expertise that circumstances had obscured but not eliminated. Spectators began laughing openly at Sarah's detailed case descriptions, treating her law enforcement knowledge as comedy show rather than legitimate testimony from qualified professional whose circumstances didn't match their expectations about police expertise and retired detective appearance. Local news reporter Mike Torres began filming what he assumed would be human interest story about homeless woman's delusions of police grandeur, not understanding that he was documenting systematic legal discrimination against qualified law enforcement professional whose appearance prevented recognition of authentic service record. Facing systematic ridicule while presenting legitimate police evidence tested every lesson law enforcement training had taught Sarah about maintaining professional dignity under hostile interrogation while protecting information that validated her investigative expertise despite adverse circumstances. The courtroom's mockery forced Sarah to articulate police knowledge in simpler terms without compromising accuracy, translating complex investigative concepts for legal audience that couldn't understand technical terminology, but insisted on dismissing it as fraudulent rather than educational about actual police procedures. Her response to legal discrimination revealed character developed through detective work. She maintained investigative objectivity while facing personal attacks that challenged her professional identity, expertise, and right to participate in justice system that she'd once served with distinction. The confrontation crystallized her understanding of societal prejudice. Law enforcement expertise meant nothing without appropriate social status, creating systems where police knowledge was valued only when it came from sources that met appearance expectations rather than actual qualifications and service records. Sarah's police identity strengthened under attack, reminding her that investigative knowledge remained valuable regardless of society's judgment about her worth. and that her expertise could help people even when institutions refused to recognize or validate her professional law enforcement capabilities and experience. As Sarah's police testimony faced complete dismissal and potential criminal prosecution for fraudulent law enforcement claims, the courtroom situation approached crisis where authentic expertise would be legally punished because appearance didn't match professional expectations about retired detectives. Judge Patterson's growing anger at Sarah's persistence in using police terminology suggested imminent felony charges that would imprison her for demonstrating expertise that homeless status apparently invalidated through appearance-based credibility assessment rather than factual evaluation of claimed qualifications. Prosecutor Miller's success in portraying Sarah's police knowledge as delusional created legal precedent where qualified law enforcement professionals could be criminalized for possessing expertise that their circumstances made socially unacceptable to recognize or validate through institutional processes. The courtroom's collective ridicule of authentic police expertise represented broader societal failure to recognize value in former public servants whose circumstances didn't match expectations, creating systems where service records were dismissed when they came from sources that challenged assumptions about professional appearance. Sarah's case was becoming a cautionary tale about how justice systems could criminalize authentic law enforcement expertise when it appeared in unexpected packages, transforming qualified former officers into criminals for possessing knowledge that society couldn't accommodate within rigid social categories. Judge Patterson's patience exploded as Sarah continued presenting detailed police evidence using investigative terminology that the court viewed as elaborate mental illness, rather than authentic law enforcement expertise, creating legal crisis where knowledge itself was being pathologized and criminalized. Ms. Chen, this court will not tolerate fraudulent claims of police service, Patterson declared while preparing felony charges that would imprison Sarah for possessing knowledge that her homeless appearance made legally unacceptable to acknowledge or validate through institutional recognition. Prosecutor Miller seized the moment to demand psychiatric evaluation of Sarah's delusional police fantasies, transforming trespassing case into mental health commitment, proceeding where authentic expertise would be medically diagnosed as psychiatric symptoms requiring treatment rather than professional knowledge deserving respect. Your Honor, this woman's persistent claims of detective experience constitute dangerous delusions that could harm public safety if left untreated. Miller argued while Sarah's 20 years of law enforcement service and criminal case solutions were being reframed as mental illness requiring hospitalization. The courtroom erupted in uncomfortable laughter as Patterson threatened immediate psychiatric hold for Sarah's continuing police impersonation delusions, creating spectacle where homeless woman's authentic knowledge became medical emergency for legal professionals who couldn't recognize expertise when it appeared outside expected social packages. Sarah faced impossible choice: abandon her police identity to avoid psychiatric commitment or continue defending expertise that legal system was treating as dangerous mental illness because her circumstances didn't match professional appearance, expectations that society required for recognizing law enforcement qualifications. The crisis had escalated beyond criminal prosecution to psychiatric incarceration, where Sarah's police expertise was being medically redefined as delusional disorder that threatened public safety through homeless woman's audacity in possessing knowledge that her social status couldn't legitimately support according to institutional prejudices. Standing in the courtroom facing psychiatric commitment for possessing police knowledge that her homeless appearance made medically unacceptable, Sarah confronted the fundamental choice between abandoning her law enforcement identity or accepting hospitalization for authentic expertise that society couldn't accommodate. The safe choice was capitulation. Accept psychiatric evaluation allowed doctors to diagnose her police knowledge as delusions and disappear into mental health system where society preferred former public servants whose service had become socially inappropriate to acknowledge or validate. But Sarah realized that abandoning her police expertise would validate every prejudice about homeless individuals while betraying the knowledge that remained her only connection to meaningful service despite circumstances that obscured its worth. If I deny my police career, I'm telling every fallen officer that their service becomes worthless when circumstances change, Sarah thought, while Judge Patterson prepared psychiatric hold for her law enforcement delusions. Her decision crystallized around deeper truth. Society needed her investigative knowledge even when it couldn't recognize or validate the expertise that homelessness had disguised but not eliminated through circumstances beyond her professional control. The ultimate stakes transcended her personal situation, whether qualified law enforcement professionals would be psychiatrically committed for possessing expertise that social status couldn't support, or whether police knowledge itself had value regardless of the circumstances surrounding those who possessed and offered it. Sarah's choice would determine whether authentic law enforcement expertise could survive social prejudice or whether appearance-based discrimination would eliminate qualified former officers from participation in justice systems that needed their knowledge but couldn't accommodate their circumstances through institutional inflexibility. Sarah made the choice that would validate authentic law enforcement expertise over social and medical prejudice, maintain her police knowledge regardless of psychiatric consequences, trusting that truth would eventually overcome appearance-based discrimination and medical pathologizing of professional expertise. Your Honor, I am Detective Sarah Chen, badge number 4729, 20 years, with Phoenix PD Major Crimes Division. She announced with dignity that transcended her circumstances. My police expertise is not delusion. It's the result of 2 decades solving cases that protected this community. Her transformation from apologetic homeless woman to confident law enforcement professional created cognitive dissonance that silenced courtroom mockery, as her authentic authority became undeniable despite appearance that had triggered discrimination and psychiatric concerns. But her declaration increased legal and medical jeopardy as Judge Patterson viewed her persistence as dangerous delusion, requiring immediate psychiatric intervention for continuing police impersonation disorder that challenged court authority and social assumptions about professional qualifications. Sarah's courage in claiming her law enforcement identity represented fundamental challenge to systems that discarded qualified officers based on circumstances rather than service records, proving that expertise couldn't be eliminated through social rejection or medical pathologizing of professional knowledge. Her dignity under attack demonstrated that authentic police service retained value regardless of society's judgment about those who'd provided it. As Judge Patterson prepared psychiatric commitment orders that would institutionalize Sarah for claiming police expertise. Her appearance couldn't support the courtroom doors opened to admit Chief Michael Rodriguez arriving to testify as character witness in a different case scheduled after Sarah's hearing. Chief Rodriguez's presence immediately commanded respect that Sarah's homeless appearance had prevented, as his law enforcement authority and professional standing created instant credibility that 20 years of detective service couldn't achieve when obscured by poverty and social rejection. Sarah recognized her former superior and colleague who had been forced to accept her early retirement during the prescription drug crisis that destroyed her career, but whose police authority could validate her service record if he chose to acknowledge their professional relationship. Chief Rodriguez will now understand why former officers can't receive justice, Sarah thought, while facing psychiatric commitment for possessing police knowledge that society refused to recognize when it appeared in unexpected social packages. The convergence of Sarah's legal crisis with Chief Rodriguez's court appearance created perfect opportunity for professional recognition that could either validate her law enforcement expertise or confirm her complete rejection by police community that had abandoned her to institutional prejudice and medical pathologizing. Chief Rodriguez's entrance created immediate tension as Sarah faced recognition by superior who possessed authority to validate her police expertise, but also professional pressure to maintain distance from disgraced former detective whose association could damage department reputation. Judge Patterson paused psychiatric proceedings to acknowledge Chief Rodriguez's law enforcement status, while Sarah waited to see whether police leadership would finally support her expertise or continue institutional rejection that had enabled legal and medical discrimination. Chief Rodriguez, this court is dealing with individual claiming fraudulent police credentials, Patterson explained, while providing opportunity for law enforcement authority to either support or condemn Sarah's knowledge, claims that justice system couldn't evaluate independently. Prosecutor Miller attempted to influence Chief Rodriguez's response. "Chief, this homeless woman has been impersonating police officer, claiming detective expertise that her circumstances obviously disprove through appearance and mental health concerns." The courtroom fell silent as law enforcement authority confronted authentic expertise disguised by circumstances that challenged institutional assumptions about professional qualifications and the relationship between service records and current social status and credibility assessment. Sarah's fate now depended on whether police leadership would recognize authentic expertise or join social and medical rejection that prioritized appearance over actual service and professional capability. Chief Rodriguez studied Sarah carefully while processing the impossible contradiction between her homeless appearance and the familiar investigative terminology he'd heard her using with precision that only authentic police training could provide through years of academy education and field experience. "Sarah," Chief Rodriguez asked with growing recognition that transformed courtroom dynamics as law enforcement authority acknowledged homeless woman's authentic professional identity despite circumstances that had obscured but not eliminated her police expertise. His recognition created immediate silence as spectators realized they had been witnessing discrimination against qualified law enforcement professional whose circumstances didn't match their expectations about retired detective expertise and police service records. Judge Patterson's confusion was obvious. Chief Rodriguez "Do you know this individual?" His question indicated growing uncertainty about psychiatric proceedings against someone whom respected police authority was acknowledging as legitimate former colleague with authentic service record. Sarah felt years of rejection and humiliation beginning to lift as institutional recognition finally validated expertise that society had dismissed based on appearance rather than actual knowledge and professional law enforcement capability. Chief Rodriguez's recognition created immediate complications as he faced choice between professional association with disgraced former detective or continued institutional rejection that enabled ongoing discrimination against qualified law enforcement professional whose circumstances had changed, but expertise remained intact. Detective Sarah Chen was one of our finest investigators, Chief Rodriguez stated while creating professional validation that challenged every assumption the courtroom had made about homeless woman's police claims and authentic law enforcement expertise. But his acknowledgement raised questions about why qualified detective was homeless and facing psychiatric commitment, rather than receiving department support and recognition for service that had protected community. According to institutional expectations about police career outcomes, Prosecutor Miller attempted damage control. Chief Rodriguez, "Surely you're not suggesting this homeless individual possesses legitimate law enforcement credentials?" His question reflected disbelief that police expertise could exist in circumstances that social prejudice couldn't accommodate. Judge Patterson faced complete reversal of assumptions as respected law enforcement authority validated homeless woman's expertise, while justice system had been preparing to psychiatrically commit authentic knowledge based on appearance rather than factual assessment of professional qualifications and service records. The courtroom atmosphere shifted dramatically as mockery transformed to embarrassment about discrimination against qualified former officer whose circumstances hadn't eliminated expertise that society had refused to recognize through institutional prejudice. The climactic revelation occurred when Chief Rodriguez disclosed that Sarah had solved the city's most notorious serial killer case, creating professional validation that proved homeless woman's police expertise had directly protected the community that was now prosecuting her for possessing knowledge. Detective Chen solved the Riverside serial killer case that had stumped our department for 3 years, Chief Rodriguez announced while providing testimony that proved homeless woman's investigative expertise had saved lives and protected families throughout the community. Judge Patterson's emotional response reflected growing realization of discrimination's scope. "You're telling me this woman solved major crimes?" His question indicated understanding that he had been criminalizing police expertise that had benefited his own community. Sarah's response showed professional humility. Complex investigations require systematic analysis. Any qualified detective would have applied similar methodologies. But Chief Rodriguez corrected her modesty. No other detective could crack that case. Sarah's innovative investigation techniques saved lives. The courtroom's atmosphere transformed completely as professional testimony validated homeless woman's police expertise while revealing that her knowledge had directly protected people who were now discriminating against her based on circumstances rather than service record and professional capabilities. Rodriguez's recognition of Sarah as accomplished detective created powerful institutional impact that transcended legal proceedings and medical prejudice about professional qualifications disguised by homelessness, but never eliminated through circumstances. Judge Patterson's professional testimony about Sarah's life-saving investigative expertise created complete transformation in courtroom attitudes as discrimination gave way to recognition of authentic police knowledge that had been disguised by circumstances but never eliminated through social rejection. His detailed account of Sarah's detective skills and professional achievements provided validation that restored her credibility, while educating legal professionals about the qualified law enforcement officers that social prejudice often discarded based on appearance rather than actual service records and capability. Detective Chen's expertise protected this community's families when serial killer threatened public safety. Patterson announced, while providing judicial recognition that transformed Sarah from psychiatric patient to honored law enforcement professional whose circumstances didn't diminish expertise. Chief Rodriguez's advocacy established Sarah's professional credentials, while Patterson's institutional support created judicial protection against further discrimination based on appearance rather than actual qualifications and authentic police service record. The breakthrough extended beyond individual vindication. Sarah's recognition created precedent for protecting qualified law enforcement professionals whose circumstances might obscure but never eliminate authentic expertise that communities needed regardless of social packaging or current status. Sarah's vindication transformed the courtroom as Judge Patterson dismissed all charges while apologizing for discriminatory treatment and ordering city services to provide housing assistance and medical support for former detective whose service had protected the community. Chief Rodriguez offered Sarah consulting opportunities with cold case unit that would restore her professional income and law enforcement authority while accommodating circumstances that prevented traditional police employment but couldn't eliminate investigative knowledge. Most importantly, Sarah's case established legal precedent protecting qualified former officers whose expertise remained valuable, regardless of circumstances that might obscure their knowledge but never invalidate their authentic capabilities and community service. Sarah's courtroom vindication created immediate media attention as news organizations covered the story of homeless detective whose police expertise had been pathologized by justice system until professional recognition revealed her authentic qualifications and crime-solving history that had protected the community. Judge Patterson implemented new court procedures requiring evaluation of claimed law enforcement background through official verification rather than appearance-based assessment, protecting qualified former officers whose circumstances might obscure their service records while preventing discrimination based on social status. Chief Rodriguez established consulting position for Sarah with cold case unit that utilized her investigative expertise while accommodating her circumstances, proving that police knowledge retained value regardless of traditional employment limitations that homeless status might create for former officers. Phoenix PD created outreach program connecting homeless individuals with law enforcement professionals who could provide support and identify qualified personnel whose circumstances had hidden their expertise from systems that needed their knowledge and investigative capabilities. Sarah's case influenced legal precedents throughout Arizona as courts recognized the importance of verifying claimed police background through official channels rather than appearance-based assumptions about law enforcement qualifications. 2 years later, Sarah's story influenced national policies for evaluating law enforcement expertise in legal proceedings, as courts implemented official verification rather than appearance-based credibility determination that had discriminated against qualified former officers whose circumstances didn't match expectations. Police organizations created programs for supporting law enforcement professionals whose circumstances prevented traditional employment, but whose expertise remained valuable for community service consultation and cold case investigation that could benefit society while restoring professional dignity. Law enforcement academies incorporated Sarah's case into training about recognizing fellow officers regardless of circumstances and the importance of supporting colleagues whose service might be obscured by personal challenges that didn't eliminate professional qualifications. Homeless advocacy organizations adopted Sarah's legal strategy for protecting qualified individuals whose law enforcement expertise could contribute to community safety when properly recognized rather than dismissed based on circumstances that obscured but didn't eliminate professional capabilities. The case established national precedent for protecting police expertise regardless of personal circumstances, proving that investigative knowledge retained value independent of social status or appearance that might influence credibility assessment without reflecting actual qualifications and service records. Sarah evolved from rejected homeless individual to respected police consultant whose expertise was properly valued despite circumstances that had temporarily obscured her professional capabilities, and standing within law enforcement community that had abandoned her. Her legal victory restored professional dignity while proving that authentic police expertise transcended circumstances when society learned to recognize service regardless of appearance or social status that might initially obscure qualifications and achievements. Police knowledge serves communities regardless of the circumstances surrounding those who possess it. Sarah often tells audiences, investigation doesn't require social status. It requires skills, experience, and commitment to justice, regardless of personal cost or recognition. Sarah's story proves that authentic police expertise transcends circumstances and that communities benefit when systems recognize service based on actual capability rather than appearance. True justice requires evaluating qualifications through official verification rather than prejudice that discards qualified former officers when their circumstances don't match social expectations. Epilogue. Today, Detective Sarah Chen, her rank was restored, operates the Phoenix Homeless Veteran Support Unit, where her investigative expertise serves former military and police personnel, while training current officers about recognizing colleagues whose circumstances might obscure their service records. Her cardboard sign now reads, "Former Detective, here to help," attracting both clients who need legal assistance and officers who want to learn from her unique perspective on community policing. The courtroom, where she was nearly committed for possessing police knowledge, now hosts continuing education seminars about recognizing law enforcement expertise, regardless of circumstances, with Judge Patterson frequently speaking about the importance of official verification over appearance-based assessment. Chief Rodriguez remains her strongest advocate and collaborator, proving that authentic professional relationships can survive circumstances that test but don't eliminate mutual respect and recognition. Sarah's consulting work has influenced police policies nationwide, demonstrating that qualified former officers can contribute valuable expertise even when traditional employment isn't possible due to circumstances beyond their control. Her case continues inspiring legal reforms that protect law enforcement knowledge from discrimination while proving that the most valuable investigative expertise often comes from those whose experience transcends conventional professional boundaries, and that society's greatest protectors are sometimes hidden among those it overlooks through prejudice that mistakes appearance for capability.